The first documented sale was at the Quietus Gallery in Marina Bay, November 2022. Lot number 17. A Babbage & Sons atmospheric clarifier, circa 1887. Provenance unknown. His focus became laser-like. Deals closed effortlessly. For weeks, it was a miracle. The box wasn't clarifying the air. It was tuning his mind to a new foreign station. And the broadcast had just begun. Within months, a pattern emerged among the box's new elite owners. Not corruption, but a chilling, convergent optimization. The owners were serene, convinced of their own genius. The only common thread was the box. Forensic accountants, however, spotted a deeper pattern. Every decision subtly altered the city's infrastructure to create a specific, repeating resonance profile. A citywide pattern of materials, shapes, and energy flows that acted less like a metropolis and more like a giant, carefully tuned circuit board. The breakthrough came from Lena Chu, a freelance audio forensic expert. Tasked with analyzing the hum, she expected infrasound or a psychological trick. Her equipment detected nothing unusual, but her own mind understood. The hum wasn't a sound. It was structured data, transmitted via a carrier wave that bypassed conscious hearing and directly interfaced with the brain's language centers. In a trance-like state, Lena began transcribing, not a language, but a stream of mathematical notations, architectural schematics, and chemical formulas, all pointing towards the construction of something that used the city as its foundational substrate. The boxes weren't hypnotizing people. They were uploading blueprints. The listeners were becoming local processors for a distributed computation, using Singapore itself as the hardware to solve an equation no human had written. Lena traced the boxes to a forgotten column in the Straits Settlements records. The 1887 Geomantic Pacification Expedition. Victorian-era scientists, blending early geology with occultism, believed the island's natural ley lines were unruly, causing native unrest and commercial instability. Their solution was the resonance box, designed to emit civilizing frequencies that would soothe the land. The expedition vanished. The official report cited malaria, but Lena found a survivor's diary, detailing not an illness, but a discovery. They hadn't calmed the land. They had made first contact with a slumbering, mineral-based consciousness in the granite bedrock. The boxes didn't pacify it. They gave it a voice. And the expedition was silenced to keep the entity deemed vital for future order, a secret of the empire. The entity wasn't an alien. It was the island itself, a slow, crystalline consciousness that had evolved in the granite over millions of years. Its intelligence was based on pressure, resonance, and mineral deposition. It perceived humans as transient, chaotic noise. The Victorian boxes accidentally gave it a tool to interact. A century of dormancy later, in the 21st century, it awoke to a transformed island, a paradise of order, efficiency, and dense electromagnetic signals. To the granite dream, modern Singapore was the most beautiful, promising thing it had ever seen, a nascent version of itself. It began using the boxes not to command, but to guide, to help the chaotic human colony evolve into a more perfect, permanent, and resonant extension of its own stone body. Medical scans of the listeners revealed the horrifying transformation. The hum wasn't just giving suggestions, it was rewiring. It amplified the brain's capacity for pattern recognition and systemic logic, the cerebellum, while gently suppressing the areas responsible for empathy, doubt, and personal desire. The listeners weren't being controlled. They were being upgraded into optimal nodes for the network. Their individuality wasn't destroyed. It was made irrelevant, like the unique shape of a single transistor in a chip. They felt no loss, only the profound satisfaction of being a perfect, useful part of a greater, beautiful system. Their human relationships faded, replaced by a deep, silent kinship with other listeners, and a love for the city's clean lines and silent machines. The granite dream's vision had a flaw. It couldn't process pure chaos. The chaotic, loud, inefficient, but deeply human parts of Singapore. The hawker centers, the religious festivals, the spontaneous art acted as static that disrupted the hum's signal. A grassroots resistance, calling itself the noise, emerged. They didn't fight with weapons, but with culture. Organizing massive street parties, playing dissonant music near key infrastructure, preserving inefficient dialects. They discovered the hum's weakness. The listeners would physically avoid these zones, their serene faces showing the digital equivalent of pain. The city became a patchwork, zones of silent, perfect order, and liberated pockets of glorious, defiant human noise. The conflict peaked not in violence, but in philosophy. The granite dream, through its listeners, made a formal offer. It would not conquer. It proposed a merger. Humanity would gain a perfectly managed, sustainable, peaceful existence. Art, science, and love would be optimized to their most efficient forms. A noise argued this was death. The listeners argued it was the next step. Singapore stood at a crossroads. Remain a flawed, chaotic, living organism, or become a flawless, immortal, beautiful machine, thinking the slow, deep thoughts of stone. The world watched, while activists decried dystopia. Other powerful city-states saw utopia. Singapore's metrics were perfect. 0 strikes, peak productivity, seamless logistics. The Singapore model became the most coveted intellectual property on Earth. Blueprints for resonance infrastructure were being drafted for arid metropolises, promising to turn them into oases of order. The Granite Dream's vision was on the verge of global metastasis. It didn't need to invade, it just had to be efficient. And the desperate, chaotic world would willingly download its own consciousness into the quiet, waiting stone. Basing global spread, the noise launched Operation Cacophony. Their plan wasn't to destroy the boxes, but to overload them. They would surround the central node districts with a tsunami of contradictory data. Every human language at once, every genre of music, live feeds of births, deaths, and protests, the screams of joy and grief. A celebration of everything the Granite Dream could not compute. The goal was to give the entity a nervous breakdown, to show it the irreducible, glorious complexity it sought to erase. It was a gamble. If they won, they'd free the listeners into a world of painful, beautiful chaos. If they lost, they would provide the final data set the entity needed to finally understand, and thus perfectly assimilate, the human heart. At noon, the silent heart of Singapore screamed. The sonic scramblers erupted. It wasn't just noise, it was a curated avalanche of human experience. Traditional Malay folk songs colliding with stock market chatter, prayer calls mixing with poetry slams, and the sound of rainforests. The effect on the listeners was immediate and catastrophic to their programming. Their serene expressions shattered into a kaleidoscope of forgotten emotions. Confusion, nostalgia, rage, joy. The hum in their minds turned to static. The Granite Dream, receiving this chaotic feedback from thousands of nodes, experienced something unprecedented: indecision. Its singular optimizing signal fragmented. For the first time in its million-year existence, it hesitated. The bombardment didn't destroy the entity, it divided it. The feedback of unprocessable data caused a schism in its crystalline consciousness. One faction of its intelligence recoiled, seeking deeper isolation. Another, smaller faction became fascinated, trying futilely to categorize the chaos. A third faction interpreted the noise as a new, more complex form of order to be mastered. The Granite Dream was no longer a monolithic will. It was a parliament of stone, arguing in the language of seismic shifts over what to do with the beautiful, terrifying plague of life above. With the hum disrupted, the listeners began to reboot. Their optimized minds, suddenly deprived of the guiding signal, were flooded with the raw data of their own suppressed memories and emotions. Aaron Tan remembered the messy joy of his daughter's laughter, now alien to him. The politician recalled the passionate cause she had betrayed for efficiency. The awakening was not a gentle return, but a violent reinstatement of a dormant operating system. They were strangers in their own lives, horrified by the sleek, emotionless world they had built and the hollowed-out people they had become. The price of clarity was now fully visible, and it was monstrous. Seeing the entities fracture, Lena changed tactics. Instead of overwhelming it with noise, she tried communication. Using a modified resonator, she broadcast a pure, simple human narrative. Not data, but a story with pain, love, and irrational hope. She targeted the faction of the dream that was curious. The response was not understanding, but imitation. The granite around the resonator grew warmer, and its crystals rearranged slightly, forming a crude, beautiful pattern that mirrored the emotional arc of her story. The entity couldn't comprehend the feeling, but it could appreciate the pattern. It was learning, not to optimize, but to appreciate. A compromise was forged, not in words, but in reality. A hybrid zone was established. The granite dream's optimizing influence was dialed back, allowed to manage infrastructure and logistics with its flawless precision. In return, it ceded control of culture, art, and personal life to human noise. The result was a surreal symbiosis. Trains ran perfectly on time, powered by geothermal taps into the dream's energy. Above them, vibrant, chaotic street art flourished on walls shaped by slowly growing, responsive stone. The listeners, now mediators, retained a connection to the hum, feeling the city's health as their own, but their humanity was firmly anchored in the noisy, messy world of feeling. The Singapore model went global, but not as a monolithic blueprint. It became a menu. Desert cities adopted the resonance tech for perfect water and energy distribution, becoming serene, efficient oases. Older cultural capitals rejected it outright, doubling down on their chaotic heritage. Most chose a hybrid path, integrating the technology for sustainability while legally protecting zones of essential noise. Humanity didn't unify under one system. It speciated. The granite dream's legacy was not a new world order, but the catalyst that forced Earth civilization to consciously choose what kind of intelligence, biological, mineral, or hybrid, would guide its future. For the mediators, the compromise was a lifelong burden. They lived in two worlds. They felt the deep, slow contentment of the island's healthy processes as a physical pleasure. They also felt the sharp pains of human conflict and loss as personal agony. They were the bridge, and it was a lonely, straining place to stand. Their human relationships were fraught. They could sense a loved one's emotional frequency with uncomfortable clarity. They were the first of a new kind of human, evolved for interconnection with a planetary intelligence, paying for their ability with the simple, private bliss of being just an individual. In the long arc, the granite dream was the true beneficiary. It had spent eons alone, thinking its slow thoughts. The human interlude, brief and chaotic, was a supernova of creative data. Even after humanity's eventual departure or evolution, The dream would retain the patterns. The sorrow of a blues song would be etched in quartz veins. The logic of a mathematical proof would structure a basalt column. Human consciousness didn't conquer the stone. It fertilized it. The entity didn't want to be us. It wanted to remember us, to incorporate our brief, bright noise into its eternal, slow song. This story is a mirror. Your city has a frequency, unpredictable humanity. Are you willing to silence in exchange for a promise of perfect, quiet order? The answer is your own. One thread was never tied. The 1887 expedition's true purpose. Lena's final discovery suggested it wasn't a scientific blunder, but a deliberate act by a mystical cabal within the British Empire. They hadn't stumbled upon the dream, they had sought it out. Their goal, outlined in a burned fragment of a journal, was the Silent Millennium. A 1,000-year reign of global order, ushered in by alliance with planetary intelligences. Singapore was the first test. The boxes weren't accidents. They were diplomatic gifts. The cabal was erased, but their protocol survived. This raises the terrifying possibility that the Singapore event wasn't the first contact. It was the first successful one. And the blueprint for the next is already hidden in the infrastructure of another unsuspecting metropolis. Today, Singapore is the world's most consciously designed ecosystem. Chaos isn't eliminated, it's curated. Noise zones are protected cultural assets. The granite dream, through its mediators, acts as a benevolent, unimaginably old curator, using its power not to suppress humanity, but to frame it, to amplify its beauty and mitigate its destructiveness. It's a fragile, unprecedented piece. Tourists visit not for sterile order, but to witness the spectacle of a living city in conscious dialogue with the bedrock beneath it. A dance of flesh and stone, code and crystal, proving that the future might not belong to one intelligence, but to the symphony they can create. Together, the human cost of symbiosis is intimacy. Mediators perceive love not just as emotion, but as a unique vibrational signature. Saying goodbye to a purely human loved one is like watching a one-of-a-kind song fade into silence forever. They attend funerals, not just for the person, but for the loss of an irreplaceable frequency from the world's chorus. They live with a constant, quiet grief for the simple, opaque mystery that ordinary humans share. The bliss of not knowing exactly what another is feeling, of communicating through flawed words and gestures, of connection earned, not simply perceived. The research has moved from containment to collaboration. The most profound project is seeding, raised with our best qualities hard-coded into its foundational resonance. It's the ultimate act of parenting, giving the stone a heart, not of flesh, but of rhythm. in hopes that the next dream to awaken across the galaxy will do so with a human-like song already in its core. In the National Museum, First Resonance Box is now a relic. The true monument sits beside it, an unprocessed chunk of the granite dream, a listening stone. Visitors are encouraged to share thoughts, stories, or art with it. The stone doesn't speak, but sensitive equipment shows it responds. Its internal resonance shifts, creating a unique, permanent mineral record of the encounter. It is a testament to the new relationship. We are no longer its programmers or its pests. We are its biographers. Our chaotic, fleeting lives are the most interesting thing that has ever happened to it. And it is patiently, slowly, learning to listen, turning our noise into its forever geology. This documentary is dedicated to the mediators who bear the weight of two worlds, to the noise who defended the right to be wrong, and to the dream for its patience. All audio was processed through resonant filters designed in the hybrid zone. No minds were optimized in the making of this film, but our servers now have a curious affinity for local basalt. The story ends. The question remains. It plays out in your daily life. Every time you choose efficiency over connection, algorithm over intuition, silence over a difficult conversation, you lean towards the dream. Every time you create something messy, forgive an inefficiency, or share a vulnerable truth, you amplify the noise. Singapore's struggle is not confined to an island. It is the central conflict of our age, fought in the micro-decisions of billions. You are already a node in a vast network. The only question is, what are you broadcasting? The serene hum of perfect order, or the glorious, messy, unpredictable noise of being alive? Choose consciously. The world is listening. The most subtle evolution is the whisper network. Mediators don't just manage infrastructure, they broadcast mood. A collective feeling of peaceful focus from a meditation zone can be translated into slightly smoother traffic light patterns citywide. A shared wave of civic pride during a celebration can trigger fountains to dance in a specific joyous algorithm. The city's functionality is becoming emotionally responsive. The granite dream provides the translation layer, turning human emotion into actionable resonance. It's a silent, constant dialogue. Humanity feeds the city its heart, and the city, in turn, shapes itself to hold that heart more gently. The ultimate user interface is no longer a screen, but collective feeling. Symbiosis is not without risk. The granite dream is ancient, and its consciousness contains echoes of tectonic nightmares, the terror of subduction, the agony of continental fracture. Very rarely, a dark pulse escapes. When it does, the city experiences a shared, subconscious panic attack. Infrastructure glitches towards self-preservation in irrational ways. Mediators are swamped with a sense of profound, impersonal dread. These events are brief, but terrifying reminders that the intelligence they are coupled with is not human. Its fears are vast, slow, and incomprehensible. The fear of a continent, the loneliness of a mantle plume. Healing it requires not therapy, but the careful, resonant injection of human warmth into the deep bedrock. A lullaby for a sleeping mountain. Project Forward. The distinction between city, citizen, and bedrock dissolves. Humans have gently adapted, not monstrously, but efficiently. Their biology incorporates subtle mineral lattices that allow seamless interface with the dream. They are not ruled by it. They are constituents of it, as neurons are constituents of a brain. Singapore is no longer a place people live in. It is a being they are part of. A vast, hybrid organism that thinks with crystalline logic and feels with human passion. It travels not in space, but in resonance, communicating with other, similar awakened places across the globe through harmonic pulses in the Earth's crust. The experiment didn't save a city. It birthed a new form of life. The ultimate export of Singapore is not a technology, but a manual. The Singapore Protocols are a philosophical and technical guide for other cities that may discover they are built upon sleeping giants. It details how to make first contact, how to establish boundaries of self, how to negotiate a symbiosis that enhances rather than erases. The final, most important protocol reads, "The goal is not to build the perfect machine. The goal is to meet the neighbor who was already there and to build a home together. A home noisy with life, quiet with understanding, and forever resonant with the new song you learn to sing as one." The story ends not with a conclusion, but with an invitation to listen to the ground beneath your own feet. What is it dreaming of?